What is going on, everyone? So in this week's video, I want to talk about a compositional commonality among my work. And this is something that I actively consider while establishing a good chunk of my compositions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a series of photos. I'm going to see if you can figure out what this commonality is. And I'm going to talk about why it is that I do and what we're all looking at here. So let's start with this photo taken in Zion National Park of some damp sand after some water had flowed through there, sprinkled with some leaves from the trees above. A photo from Death Valley with some boulders in a canyon. Next up is a pretty cool looking tree, gnarly old tree here, a box elder in the Narrows in Zion. And then also in Zion, a photo as a winter storm was breaking with the snow-covered trees and little atmospherics in the background. A photo of a leaf frozen in the ice in Zion, followed by a photo with some eroded rocks scattered along this sandstone slope with some reflected light. And then finally, a photo of this fracture in a sandstone wall with a cactus here. So there's something that all of these photos have in common, and it's something that I was actively considering while establishing all these compositions. The question is, have you figured it out? So let's start by looking at this first photo here. Now, while establishing this composition, I wanted to make sure we had a good amount of visual flow through the composition. And I had the ability to move my camera around, try to figure out how I was going to show this really interesting area with all these dried ripples here. And I couldn't experiment too much because obviously I'm leaving footprints, and as I'm moving my tripod around a lot, I'm going to leave tripod holes and stuff like that. But one thing that I was very careful with was I want to make sure that it entered from the top edge right here and then flowed through the composition. So you'll notice that basically this area right here is where the this flow begins, and then it kind of widens a little bit as it goes through, but it kind of works through the composition like this, conveniently missing that corner and that corner. So what I did is I drew some guides here just to illustrate what it was I was thinking. And so I'm going to turn off the second one here. You see this right here is basically the flow I wanted to have for this composition. If I go to the next photo, we have something pretty similar going on here, but there's two forces at play here. So I'm going to turn off my guides here. While I was establishing this composition, I was paying very close attention to where this boulder meets the ground. So right here, where this boulder meets the ground, to make sure that these lines created right here and right here don't just go right out through a corner. Meanwhile, we also have a really strong line right here, exiting there, and a really strong line right there, exiting there. So I was trying to make sure that we didn't have any of these go right through a corner because it gets kind of awkward looking. But there's another thing at play here as well, which is we have these two primary subjects. And so when we have a composition like this, you're going to end up having this visual flow from one subject to the next. And if you look at this, the line that connects between them misses that corner as it works its way through, and then it misses that corner there. So these are the two things that I was paying attention to. Primarily this, but also trying to make sure that it didn't just shoot straight diagonally through the composition, because again, it looks a little bit awkward. It just doesn't look very natural, I think is what it gets down to it. And so if we go to the next photo here, so we have this really big fracture. We have the tree here, and certainly this fracture points to the tree, but if this went straight to the corner, it'd be a little bit awkward. And so even if we look at the largest part of the fracture right here, the center of that would be right about in here, but really the business end of it is this edge right here, which connects right down to the tree. And so if I put up this line right here, this is basically what I had in mind. Now, these lines that I put in here, they are at a 45-degree angle, creating this nice 90 degrees in here. What I'm really most paying attention to is that space, that space, that space, that space. What is the safe distance from a corner such that it just feels a little bit more natural. And it so happens that with a 4:5 aspect ratio, you basically kind of cross them in the middle there. And again, this is not like a scientific thing. This is just a visual illustration of what it is I'm trying to achieve with these compositions to give it a calm feeling and avoid the awkwardness. If we go to the next one here, whoops, and I turn off my lines here. Now we don't have any strong diagonal lines within this composition. It's not like we have the scene of the previous photo with the fracture that drops down. We don't have that. But we do have as a few subjects here that are going to attract your attention. And one of the things when you look at a photo is that your attention is going to go from one subject to the next. It goes to the most dominant subject first and then kind of works its way through the composition. So the question is, as you look at this composition, what is it that attracts your eye the most? It's probably either going to be this stone or this top of the tree. It's probably going to be one of those. There is another subject as well, which is the base of the tree, which is maybe a little less important. But if we look at the line connecting between these guys right here, I don't think it's a coincidence that it happens to generally follow that. If I had the camera positioned to the right or left and then this dropped right down to here, it'd be kind of an awkward space on the right side. So again, it's just trying to make a subject a little bit more dynamic by paying attention to the spacing of things, but just so your eye can flow from one to the next, but still have a appropriate amount of space on either side of the composition. Next up is the photo of the leaf that is frozen in the ice here. Now, while I was setting up this composition, I certainly like to anchor subjects in this lower third area, but there is a line that I was paying attention to in this specific composition with regard to the corners. I want to see if you can figure out what that line is. And well, it's this guy right here. So not only this line, which misses the corner, but also this shape, which also misses the corner. You could probably imagine how this, if the top corner of the composition was more in here, and this went straight out that corner, that is going to awkwardly steal attention away from the leaf there. So by having it miss the corner, we release that visual tension, which gives a calmer feeling. Whenever I see a line go right to the corner, it just attracts attention to it. It's just so very awkward. It's almost like if you go to a restaurant and then you order your food, they bring the food to the table and the person says, "Hope you enjoy your meal," and then you say, "You too," and then you kind of want to die inside a little bit. That's like what it is if you have a subject going right to that corner. It's just really awkward and takes attention away from everything else. Next up is this photo. Now this one I had two different subjects that I was trying to balance, two different lines I was trying to balance. The first is this. So we have this fracture that works its way up here. And even though this is actually a separate line, visually it just kind of continues across and out the frame. So I try to make sure that this did not go to the corner. I was trying to balance out. In a perfect world, I'd actually have this a little further away from the corner, but I was also trying to balance that with this. So we don't have an actual line, but we have, just like we did with that photo of the boulders in Death Valley, where the subjects, you kind of have this connecting line between them. Same things happen here. So we have the big rock, the medium-sized rock, and the cluster. So you end up with a line that goes a bit like this. So you have a line that goes here and a line that goes here. And if you look at it, neither of them goes directly to a corner. And that's what I was trying to balance when setting up this composition. Because I think if they did go to the corner, it would take attention away from the other line. And then that's just, when things start looking a little bit awkward, you don't quite know why. Sometimes it's something along those lines. And then finally, we have the photo with the fracture and with the cactus. So here, I'm trying to have it where we have this line that basically works its way through the composition, missing that corner, dropping through, missing that corner. And again, if I do my little overlay here, now it doesn't mean that we have to have something follow these lines exactly. This is just a rough guide, but basically showing that we want something to have a safe distance from this corner and have a safe distance from that corner, which is how we can have a photo that has a dynamic feel to it, but also feels grounded, feels natural, doesn't feel awkward. Now, another question you might have is, well, these are all horizontal compositions. What about vertical? So I have some examples for vertical as well. Same principle applies, but my little thing of drawing the X, it's not a matter of simply flipping it, because then it is a little bit differently. So if I turn on my fancy X here, again, I'm trying to have a safe distance between the lower corners and the upper corners, because I do like when a subject exits or enters from the bottom edge of the composition. And yeah, there are certainly times, and I'll show another example, where having something pass above the corners is also a good way to go. But in this case, we have this tree, and I wanted to make sure that it entered a safe distance from this corner, visually worked its way up diagonally through the composition. You lose the trunk a little bit, and it actually ends up right about here. But even if you weren't able to see it at all, we create this line that continues outside the composition right there, missing that corner. And the other thing I paid attention to on this one was this branch right here. Try to make sure that this did not go directly out that corner. And you see it exiting just shy of it there. So it's something, if you pay attention to those corners, if you pay attention to not only specific lines, but also lines created by multiple subjects as they sort of create a larger shape. But that's one. Here's another example. This is a dead sun-bleached cottonwood tree in Zion. And on this one, I wanted to have it where the tree entered a safe distance from that corner, worked its way up through the composition, and then visually exits, again, a safe distance from that corner. So if I turn on the little lines there, again, we don't have to follow this angle directly, but it's just a general rule of thumb where we want something to go like this as opposed to like that. Perfectly straight up and down is also fine, but something a little bit of an angle is a bit more dynamic visually. So it's a good way of introducing a dynamic sense to a photo, but without it being too out of balance. This one's a little bit different. This is not going to adhere to this as much, but it kind of does. So with this particular photo, what I was really paying attention to was the distance. So we have these lines created right here from the boundary between the floor of the canyon and the canyon wall. We have a line right here, line right here, a line right here. You notice how this one exits the frame right here, a safe distance from the corner. This one exits right there, that one exits right there. And while I was setting up this composition, I was actually using my fingers on the ground glass to measure these things. And so if that distance right there is the same as that distance right there, and it's about the same as that distance right there. And I was doing this because I was wanting to make sure that these are all visually balanced so that they don't steal attention away from the middle of the frame, which is what I want to be the most important part of it. So again, having things avoid those corners, a nice safety cushion from the corners, creates a photo that looks less awkward, looks more natural. And then here is a photo I took last year in Zion. And I love the angles of these roots here. And while I was setting up this composition, even though this root disappears in the sand, it visually continues right about there, kind of going above that corner. And then this one is going to exit the frame right there. So again, I'm trying to miss those corners to try to make it a bit more visually balanced, while also including a little cushion there at the bottom so that we don't have any visual distractions with the distance between that and that. And this is one of the reasons why I really like using that little plastic composition frame, And I hold it up and look at it because all this sort of stuff you can see right away in terms of how things balance. But once I'm actually set up the camera, then I'm paying extra attention to all those objects in the corners. Now, this is all with a 4:5 aspect ratio. If you have a, let's say a 2:3 aspect ratio, or let's take it to extreme like a panorama, things are going to be a little bit different in that regard. But I will say it's one of the reasons why I love the 4:5 aspect ratio, is that you can fill the frame with these dynamic lines, and you can still have a very calm composition. You get a little bit of a sense of visual motion because you have a little bit of emphasis, but it's not like really narrow like a panorama, which there's a whole art to panorama stuff. But I do enjoy a 4:5 aspect ratio because to play with all this sort of stuff. So hopefully this is helpful. It's something that if you pay attention to this very, very simple thing, well setting up a composition, I at least find that I have very few regrets after the fact, and allows me to take photos that have that sense of calm because you're alleviating, I think that's the word, that sense of visual tension that can otherwise take away from the subject. But I want to thank everyone for watching. We'll see you around next time.